I am your presenter, Claudine Bacar. In this video, we will venture to discourse and conversation with the help of our reference author, Brian Paltridge, and our professor, Dr. Rizalie Mendoza. These are the overview of our topic. When we talk about the analysis of discourse, one of its major area to study is conversation analysis. Conversation analysis is a systematic analysis of talk that is produced as a result of normal everyday interactions. This talk is referred to as talk in interaction. Conversation analysis refers to the study of orders of talk in interaction that takes place with any individual in any setting. It is an approach to the analysis of spoken discourse that looks at the way in which people manage their everyday conversational interactions, which examine aspects of spoken discourse such as conversation analysis was originated in the early 1960s at the University of California with the work of Sachs, Skegloff, and Jefferson. The key concern in CA is the view of ordinary conversation. For conversation analysts, conversation is the main way in which people come together, exchange information, negotiate, and maintain social relations. Another feature of conversation analysis is the primacy of the data as the source of information. Analysis thus do not incorporate speakers' reflections on their interactions, field notes, or interviews as ways of gathering information about the discourse. Since one of the aims of CA is to avoid starting with assumptions about analytical categories in the analysis of conversational data, conversational analysts rather look for phenomena which regularly occur in the data and then make that point of further investigation in sequence, structure, and coherence of conversations. In this view, conversation is seen as being context-shaped and context-renewing in the sense that anything anyone says in conversation both builds on what has been said or what has been going on, which creates the conditions for what will be said next. Now, when it comes to transcribing and coding conversation analysis data, the transcription of the data is also the analysis. Texts are thus recorded either tape or video, then analyzed at the same time as they are transcribed. If a particular feature such as the use of increased pitch or particular sequences of utterances becomes apparent in the analysis, this then becomes the starting point of further analysis. Let's take a look at this particular transcription convention used in conversation analysis based on the work of Jefferson. This is extracted from Sex and the City. The analysis shows a rising pitch in Charlotte's exclamation, "You are getting engaged." The period at the end of the utterance indicates an ending with falling intonation. However, a 0.5-second pause in Carrie's response before she adds, "That's not normal." Another speaker could have taken the conversation away from her at the point of the pause, but they choose not to, allowing her to comment on what she had previously said. Charlotte's lengthened vowel in "just say yes" emphasizes the point she is making before Carrie replies with "well" followed by a microsecond pause, and her use of rising intonation and the tag question, "has it?" The next two lines are examples of latch utterances. The use of capitals in "now" in Charlotte's response to Samantha indicates both loud talk and word stress. Charlotte's microsecond pause again enables her to hold the floor so that no one is able to intervene. If she had not done this, one of the speakers could have taken the turn from her. That is a transition relevance place, or TRP. Next, Samantha is able to project in advance that a TRP is approaching as Carrie is speaking and takes the floor from Carrie with her consent and without difficulty. This analysis thus shows how Carrie and her friends manage their conversation in a cooperative manner. It also shows the strategies they use when they want to take a turn in the conversation. Let's proceed to sequence and structure in conversation. In opening conversations, Skegloff analyzed a large dataset of telephone openings to come up with the following canonical opening for American private telephone conversations. A study carried out by Lowlin in Australia found a similar pattern for opening telephone conversations, except that in the Australian data, the caller most frequently self-identified in their first turn after they had recognized the recipient rather than in the second turn as in the American data. Another example is the opening telephone calls in Chinese. As observed in this conversation, the greeting and how are you sequences found in American and Australian phone calls, however, were less common or even absent in her data. The third example is from a radio call-in program as illustrated here. In this conversation, the announcer opens the conversation by saying who is on the line and what the conversation will be about. He introduces the caller and readies the speaker to discuss the topic of the call. The middle stage is devoted to the topic and the conversation ends when the caller has provided the dedication. Another aspect of conversational interactions is closing conversations. The work of Skegloff and Sachs was continued by Button, who points out that telephone closings usually have pre-closing and closing modes. Button calls this an archetype closing. In this closing, both speakers mutually negotiate at the end of the conversation. On the other hand, an insertion sequence can be introduced before the closing finally takes place. The closing may also be preceded by a number of pre-sequences, and sometimes the closing may be foreshortened. Thus, closings are complex interactional units which are sensitive to the speaker's orientation to continuing or closing the conversation. Another aspect of conversational interactions is turn-taking. There are several ways in which we can signal that we have come to the end of turn. This may be through the completion of syntactic unit, or it may be the use of falling intonation, then pausing. We may also end a unit with a signal such as or anyway to signal the end of the turn. The end of the turn may also be signaled through eye contact, body position, movement, and voice pitch. In this example, as you can see, the nominated speaker, Wong Yang, does not respond, so after a 1-second pause, the lecturer asks again. Wong Yang pauses again. He then extends the syllable in and the vowel in so. When the lecturer overlaps with comments as her way of insisting he provide a response to her question. Here, the square brackets indicates the point of overlap in the utterances. The normal brackets indicate barely audible speech, and the symbol O indicates speech that is noticeably quieter than the surrounding talk. A turn constructional unit can be made up of a single word like comments, or maybe an extended multi-unit turn. A speaker may also use overlap as a strategy, as is shown in this conversation. The speaker uses overlap as a strategy as well as to prevent someone else from taking the turn. Here, the lecturer has asked Tadashi a question, how many languages courses, but another student, Kylie, wants to take the turn by responding 38 and constantly uses overlap to do this. Let's proceed to adjacency pairs. Adjacency pairs are utterances produced by two successive speakers in a way that the second utterances is identified as related to the first one as an expected follow-up to the utterance. In this table, in each of the pairs of utterances in this interaction, the announcer stops and allows the caller to produce the expected second part to the pair of utterances. Just like, I bet you get hassled about your surname, and the caller answered, yes I do. In this another example, arguments show a similar pattern in that once a point of view has been expressed, a possible follow-up is a challenge followed by a response, like when Marie says, why, Ryan followed it up by a response so people don't crush the party. We also have adjacency pairs across cultures. For example, in Bill's study, Bill found that the French workers often responded to the everyday greeting, did you have a good weekend? by stopping and telling the English-speaking workers all about their weekend. The English-speaking workers were irritated by this because the question for them is an invasion of privacy. Then, adjacency pairs and stage of the conversation. For example, hello can perform different functions. It can be a summons and it can be a response to a summons in a telephone call. Same way to thanks that can be response to a compliment or congratulation. Moreover, in preference organization, for example, in this conversation, a question may be followed by an expected answer or unexpected or non-answer. When this happens, that this preferred second pair part is often preceded by a delay, a preface, or an account like the conversation of A and B. This table shows the common adjacency pairs and typical preferred and dispreferred second pair parts. Another example is the barrister-client interaction. O'Shaughnessy found that there was a preference for other correction rather than self-correction, meaning the client corrected the barrister by saying, "Oh, not Michael, Alan." To continue the barrister-client interactions, this shows an example of the client not providing an expected answer to the solicitor's question how long he has been an apprentice butcher. The client is unable to give the expected answer. When it comes to insertion sequences, for example, Ryan asks his mother Mary if he can have a DJ for his party. She doesn't reply, but by means of an insertion sequence, she passes the question to her husband John. Another spoken interaction examined by conversation analysts is feedback, in which listeners show they are attending to what being said. The students Tadashi and Kylie provide feedback to each other by use of the token "yeah," the repetition of keywords, falling intonation, and latch utterances. Another strategy is repair, that is, the way speakers correct things they or someone else has said and check what they have understood in a conversation. This is self-repair since the client corrected himself from saying girlfriend to woman. And this is the other repair where the client corrected the barrister's error. Let's proceed to gender and conversation analysis. Using membership categorization analysis, Stocka shows the neighborhood disputes. She examined the category of women drawn on by people engaged in the interactions. When we read this conversation, Edgar and Vernon are talking about their neighbors for a television documentary called Neighbors at War. In their view, bad women are bullies. Thus, engage in gender noticing in their negative evaluation. In conversation analysis and second language conversation, Markey discusses the importance of looking at outlier data in second language acquisition studies, pointing out that all participants' behavior makes sense to the individuals involved. Going to criticisms of conversation analysis, Baxter describes conversation analysis as an invaluable tool for the analysis or monolithic. Hammersley claims the view conversation analysis view of itself as self-sufficient research tool is problematic. Skagloff, in his analysis and interpretation of the data, just because something is not observable in the data, then does not mean that it is not relevant. Wetherell adds, post-structuralist discourse analysis would be improved by greater attention to the details of conversational interaction that is typical of work in the area of conversation analysis. We have here a sample study about refusals provided by Kitzinger and Frith. Their study is about how women communicate to men that they do not want to have sex. That is how women refuse unwanted sex. It is then refusal often involves delays, accounts, hedges, and prefaces before the speaker gets to the actual refusal of the offer. Kitzinger and Frith also outline an acceptance like, "Why don't you come up and see me sometime?" Then the other person would answer, "I would like to," is indeed an acceptance. Their study then is one that exploits the level of detail provided in conversation analytic work as well as data from other sources for social, educational, and political purposes. To sum up this discussion, Conversation analysis then provides a way of carrying out fine-grained analysis of spoken discourse which can help not just describe the social world but understand how, through the use of language, is constructed. Once again, I am your presenter, Claudine Bacar. Thank you for listening, everyone.